Okay, so hello and thank you for joining me today. During today's workshop, I'll be covering the use cases and differences for Kaltura and Zoom. While both platforms are video related, they do have varying functionalities that can determine which tool is the best option to use for your course. So for today's session, our goals are to cover the limitations and strengths of Kaltura and Zoom, as well as discuss which of the two is the most appropriate for instructional delivery. So first, let's talk about the differences between the two tools. We'll start with Kaltura. Kaltura is a video hosting service. You can build videos from scratch using Express Capture as well as import YouTube videos. Kaltura strips the ads component of all YouTube videos, so the students are focused on the content specifically. Kaltura is used for primarily recording presentations for asynchronous instruction. Many of the instructors who teach asynchronously use Kaltura to create syllabus overview videos, course outcomes, and expectation videos, as well as weekly lectures. Kaltura is also hosted within Canvas using the My Media and Media Gallery tabs. It's a tool that uses embedding to put the video content directly into the body of a page, assignment, or even in the discussion forum within Canvas. This helps keep students within Canvas without needing access to an external website. Many of us are familiar with Zoom because of 2020, but let's discuss Zoom as well. So Zoom is primarily used as a video conferencing app to host meetings or synchronous learning sessions. Zoom can record presentations and meetings, and these recordings are migrated into Kaltura automatically. Zoom has an external website that users can access and is integrated into Canvas. So when should I use these tools and why? So Kaltura is a better tool to use for asynchronous learning opportunities. Some examples include pre-recorded lectures on specific topics, like I mentioned previously, instructions for upcoming assignments or exams. These videos allow students to learn at their own pace and review material as often as they want. Instead of having students review an entire hour or longer lecture from a synchronous learning session, you can provide shorter videos about topics that are easier to digest. So you can do 15-minute increments or just shorter videos. The other thing about Kaltura is the analytics and quizzing features allow you to have better tracking of viewership, whereas with Zoom videos, you can't necessarily see who has watched those videos. If you have specific video content that is graded, you can use Kaltura's analytics to track this viewership. So Zoom is a better tool for synchronous learning sessions. Some examples include ability to schedule recurring meetings and class sessions, open discussions to review study materials for upcoming assignments, projects, and exams, virtual office hours to meet with students individually or in groups. And Zoom is a great external tool to use for guest speaker interviews or visitor presentations or other online events to connect with people off campus. And that's the one thing I can say is a positive about Zoom is, especially during the pandemic, people were able to pull in guest speakers outside of the institution that they would not have necessarily been able to use or been able to communicate with outside of Zoom. So let's look at the strengths of Kaltura. So to strengthen the learning experience using Kaltura, any video you add to your gallery can have an integrated quizzing component. We recommend creating slides within any presentation videos that you're going to be using for quizzing as a prompt for a quiz question that will appear at that point in the video. So you can learn more about that in our best practices for recording in Kaltura blog post. But just a brief synopsis, essentially, if you have a slide that's going to prompt the student to know that there's a quiz question coming up, it makes it a little bit easier when you're editing the video and you can just put that quiz question right there. Because I know that's something I can talk about in the limitations where some faculty have had issues with the quiz questions have to be on a certain spot in the timeline. So this kind of gives you a an easy spot to put the quiz question instead of cutting off any speech that you, or any point in the lecture that you don't want cut off. So like Zoom, Kaltura does have annotation options that allow the user to add markups, text, and shapes when using Kaltura Capture. When viewing videos, users have the option to flip through different layout options, even if you have it recorded in a certain way. This option is only available in Zoom during a live meeting, not during recordings. Some of the views in Kaltura that you can do exclusively the presenter's video, exclusively the screen share, picture-in-picture, which I know is a very popular one with faculty. So users can switch from the presenter's video to the screen share. And then there's the side-by-side of the presenter's video and the screen share. So Kaltura videos can be linked to the Canvas gradebook as long as, and I want to emphasize this, as long as there's a quizzing component and it's linked to an assignment within the course. So one thing that we've had some faculty have issues with linking to the gradebook is they didn't use the right external tool when they were putting it in the assignment. So you have to make sure you do the video quiz in the assignment that's going to be linked to the gradebook. So the analytics feature can track student views, as I mentioned before. This includes viewing how many times the students have watched the video, how much of the video that the students have watched. So you can see using the graphing or on the analytics, the different colors. If it's a darker blue, that means they've watched that section of the video more times than other sections of the video. And you can also see where they have skipped around in the video. So Kaltura recordings also help keep presentations on track with minimal distractions or tangents. While open discussions are encouraged for learners, this format helps ensure that students are learning the necessary material to succeed in your course. If you find yourself getting off track, you can easily find the pause button to restart if needed, whereas the Zoom pause button for recordings can be kind of tricky to find. I know especially with Mac users, the bar has a tendency to disappear. So this makes it a little bit easier and minimizes how much need to edit with the video once you're done with the recording. So as I mentioned, many of us have become familiar with Zoom as a learning tool since 2020. So let's focus on some of its strengths as well. Zoom offers a polling and Q&A feature that you can build during the meeting or ahead of time when you schedule the meeting. This might be a great way to provide in-class opportunities to test student knowledge. This allows you to get a gauge of where your students need more practice and where your students are with the material. Breakout rooms are a great way for students to build connections with classmates they may not see in person and help develop that online community. The breakout rooms provide opportunities for students to collaborate on projects, peer-to-peer instruction, study groups, and all sorts of opportunities. Like Kaltura, there are annotation options that you can use during your live presentation. However, you also have the option to allow participants in the meeting to take advantage of this tool as well. This is a great way to get students engaged during the meeting. Additionally, you can use the whiteboard feature for similar functions with the annotations. Zoom is also a great way to connect with students in an online space and give them a sense of instructor presence, whereas sometimes with asynchronous lectures, it can seem like there's too much distance between the student and the instructor. This allows you to give or obtain direct feedback from the students, as well as allowing them the opportunities to ask questions in real time. Now that we've discussed the strengths of Kaltura and Zoom, let's focus on some challenges or limitations of these tools. And let's start with Kaltura. The biggest challenge that instructors have come across is the lack of an external link for Kaltura videos. Unlike our former platform, Nomia, Kaltura requires you to embed videos into the body of a page, assignment, or discussions within Canvas. And there's no easy way to obtain an external link to share from the instructor or student side. That's more of something on the admin side that we can do. And the embedding can get a little confusing because of the coding and just knowing where to put that in the body of the page or the assignment. Once you create or add a video to Kaltura, there's the extra step of publishing the video to a course's media gallery. Because the organization of the course is alphabetical, there are plenty of chances for you to publish your video to the wrong section of your course. So it's important to read the checkbox options carefully before actually publishing the video, because we've had some instructors that have published it to, let's say, English 105 from fall of 2019. So that's something that we have to keep in mind when we're looking through the checkboxes and the publishing. When recording on Kaltura Capture, you need to record the entire screen instead of selecting a specific window or program like you can in Zoom when screen sharing. With that being the case, it's important to close out any unnecessary programs or windows. That way you don't get any email pop-up notifications or other applications distracting from the presentation. While this may be a minor challenge or limitation with Kaltura, it is something that people have mentioned when discussing recordings in Kaltura. While recording, you are unable to see your webcam view. You can only see the Captures app that has a running timer and the stop, pause, and annotation buttons. So that's something I wanted to mention as well. All right, so let's move on to Zoom. Because of the 2020 to 2022 school years, Zoom and other video conferencing platforms were heavily used by everyone in a way to stay connected to students and colleagues. Zoom fatigue became a huge problem for everyone as the pandemic marched on, and it seemed all ways to communicate were through Zoom. So it's important to use this platform only when necessary or at shorter intervals, like I mentioned, where you can do like 15-minute increments or whatnot. You can learn more about Zoom fatigue on our Tech Talk blog and workshop video on YouTube, which I can share those links after we're done with the presentation here. So additionally, with Zoom, hosts need to be proactive with security measures. While Zoom has stepped up their security game and added more features, they're only useful if the users actually use them. So that's something that was especially a problem early on in the pandemic, where you had people dropping into Zoom meetings, or you had to kick people out of Zoom meetings. And there's other security features that I can go over if people are interested, but that's something that I always encourage people to be on top of the security measures within Zoom. So the biggest concern for online learning is that feeling of being passive or an observer rather than a contributor. Students may not feel as engaged with Zoom sessions. So as I mentioned, make sure to use the tool only when necessary or in shorter increments to make the material digestible. Also, because of the passive nature of Zoom meetings, students may use the ability to turn off their camera, furthering the distance between you and the learner. The other issue that you may run into is getting off track during the session, much like in a classroom setting. The natural flow of conversation can lead to being completely off topic, and pulling everyone back together can be tricky with the audio abilities of Zoom. So you may have noticed when you're sitting in meetings that you wanted to contribute, you wanted to say something, and then someone else started talking, and because you were talking at the same time, someone had better mic quality or better webcam quality, so it just kind of created that distance, or you just felt like you weren't being heard, which kind of goes into the Zoom fatigue thing. So that's something else I wanted to mention. Finally, the Zoom recording layout or view can be challenging during live sessions. If you go back and watch your recording, you may notice that the video panel is covering a portion of the screen that you were trying to show your friends or show your students. Knowing where to put the video panel and the annotation bar can be confusing or even frustrating at times. So we recommend doing a trial recording before the meeting. I'm one of those advocates that always likes to test things at least you know, 1 or 2 times before I actually do the session. So, so just taking that extra initiative is another challenge with using Zoom. All right, so let's go back to Kaltura for a brief minute. When we're looking on the admin side, we noticed many videos that have not been viewed or were migrated over from Nomia back in 2021. To ensure that we have enough storage for everybody, it's best practice to clear out videos that you're no longer using. These can be old lectures from past semesters, brief videos testing equipment before a meeting, videos missing audio or video footage, some of those Zoom recordings of lectures that won't be used, and any duplicated video quizzes or duplicated videos in general. Just making sure that either at the beginning or the end of the semester that you have that kind of housekeeping chore of just clearing out any videos that you don't need. So because Zoom recordings do migrate over to Kaltura, this does eat up a large portion of the storage that we have overall. So if you do record all your Zoom sessions, ask yourself the following questions. Am I recording because a student will be absent? And if not, is the recording necessary? Are we reviewing material that I already covered in a pre-recorded lecture? So if you already have, say, a lecture that you're posting on one of your pages for one of your weekly modules, and you're going to be reviewing that information in your synchronous session, then that would just be duplicated videos, and probably the students wouldn't view the Zoom recording from that session because they could just go back to the weekly module video that you did. So will the recording be an important studying component for students for upcoming quizzes or assignments? So if you're doing a synchronous session, will they actually be using this for studying purposes, or do you have other materials that you would rather them utilize for any of those learning resources I mentioned? And how will I be distributing this recording? Am I going to publish it in the Kaltura Media Gallery? So because there isn't the external link option for Kaltura, and all the Zoom recordings are going into Kaltura, how will the students be accessing this? Will it just be sitting in your My Media and you can publish it to the Media Gallery, or is it just going to be sitting there? So just kind of figuring out how you're going to distribute that. Are you going to put it on a page? Will it be an assignment? So just kind of being cognizant of that. Am I using the recording to track attendance of my students? So if so, what other means can I use? So if you're going to be using, say, the gallery view to check in and see who signed on for the Zoom meeting, is there another way that you can check who signed on at the beginning and was there the whole time? That's where the polling feature from Zoom can come into play. But in terms of using Zoom recordings for attendance, I don't recommend doing that. All right, so before we end today's session, were there any questions that came up during the presentation that were not answered during the presentation? I'm just going to stop sharing my screen really quick.
Yeah. You kind of already answered this a little bit. We were talking about Zoom, and I was wondering about length, right? Because Zoom, you mentioned Zoom fatigue, and you mentioned something about like shorter bits. Mm-hmm. So let's just say, for instance, if you were using in like say an online synchronous class session, right? Say you've got an hour and 40-minute class, it doesn't make sense to have an hour and 40-minute long Zoom lecture because that's going to be that's probably one of the main reasons I got so tired of Zoom. Mm-hmm. But also you mentioned that breaking it up, and I was wondering about things like breakout rooms and Q&As. Is that an effective way to break up a longer video, or do you recommend it just to be shorter?
I would say that the actual lecture itself, it should be shorter, but you can definitely allot that time for breakout rooms, group discussions, even if it's just doing the lecture in 15-minute increments, taking
Yeah.
a 5-minute break, posing questions that the students can answer on their own, and then coming back into the next part of the lecture. So kind of breaking it up so it's not all a long lecture, but definitely utilizing the breakout rooms. Like I mentioned, the polling thing. Another idea that I had thought of when I was doing the Zoom fatigue workshop last year. If you have, say, like a working document that you can have the students contribute to, so you can use a breakout room document specifically and assign group leaders or peer instructors to discuss a specific topic, and then give them access to that document, and then they can put in notes for that document during that session after one of those increments that I mentioned.
Yeah, that makes sense. My concern was always like thinking about the whole idea of time on task, right? Mm-hmm. So if I say I have a course that's supposed to meet Monday, Wednesday, Friday for a certain amount of time, and I want to do, say, Fridays online, mm-hmm. that if that's an hour or so, is it the same thing to say do a short 15-minute Zoom session and then have them work on something for the rest of the time on their own that they'll submit? You know what I mean? They're just trying to figure out what's a viable way of doing it. And I think, but I think you're right. You could use Q&As and breakouts, and sort of that would sort of count into the whole process, I think. It's one of the main reasons that I kind of immediately, as soon as I could, I immediately switched to asynchronous, mm-hmm. just because it was easier to stagger and schedule the assignments in bits rather than long chunks. So
yeah. That's definitely a challenge with synchronous learning, and having those assigned meeting times and trying to figure out how best to use them. And in terms of using the breakout rooms, I mean, you can just jump from room to room and check in with people. And like those working documents that I mentioned, everyone can come back, and then whoever is the group leader, they can kind of present on what they discussed. And then someone can be a secretary and take notes on like a class note sheet or something.
Yeah.
So
another thing, you might have mentioned this and I might have missed it, but talking about the idea of how to share the Zoom and how to store or keep the Zoom lectures. I had pretty good luck when I was, the only way I was really using it last semester was if student was quarantined. I would Zoom record the classes through Zoom. It was, limited, but it was a recording. But what I would do is I would save it as an MP4 on my computer and then just share it with that individual student as needed. And I don't know if that's a useful way of going about it in terms of storage. If I have, as long as you have the storage on your computer, obviously.
Right. Yeah, I mean, that is an option as well. Because when you do a Zoom recording, you have the option to save it to the computer instead of to the cloud.
Yeah.
But I often find it's just easier to do it in the cloud. So then that way it is in my Kaltura. And I can just add collaborators on videos as well. But yeah, I mean, that's another method, is if, that's easier.
I guess I was trying to organize my life in trades because I knew I would forget to go back and delete all of the stuff I was having to record for students. I'm glad you mentioned actually the Kaltura videos. That's one thing I probably do need to do, is to go back in and look at what things am I really using and what things not, and get rid of the stuff that's extraneous. Yeah, I haven't really used it much, but I like the idea of using the quizzing function in Kaltura. And adding questions, even if it's not necessarily for a quiz, it's like a graded thing. If it's a way to at least sort of get student feedback, I might try to use that a little more effectively. I haven't really explored that very much.
Yeah, I know early on there were some issues with the quizzes not syncing up with the grade book, but that was more of the faculty weren't selecting the external tool option. Yeah. They were just putting like a quiz video into the the body of a page or something, and you know, it wasn't going where it needed to go.
Yeah, yeah.
um,
One last thing I have for a question is thinking about the media gallery. I have not really been that good about using the media gallery in the Canvas classes. I generally, what I tend to do is if I want the students to look at a Kaltura video, I just embed it in a particular assignment,
okay.
Something like that. And I'm wondering if you recommend one way or the other. I mean, am I missing out on something that I could be getting by using the media gallery, or is it, if it works for me to organize it through the assignment, should I just do it that way?
The other thing that I recommend for faculty to do is create playlists for specific weeks or specific topics.
Oh.
And you can actually import those playlists so you don't have to recreate them every semester or for various sections of the course if you're not cross-listing them. And if there's specific topics that you want students to review that week or series of weeks, then you can embed that playlist into a page, or you know, you can just leave it in the media gallery and link, use the URL for the media gallery in a, on your module or something.
Yeah.
So
it's, that whole idea of reusing videos is something that's funny that I haven't, I'm thinking about the sort of pedagogical idea of how the ins and outs and the problems of it. Like, just like, for instance, just like an example I'll give you is I had videos from the winter in my English 126 online class during the winter intersession. And then I wanted to reuse those videos in the spring. And I had to really double check myself because I was really bad at keeping the videos. What's the word? There's a word you guys use for like that I can reuse them, that they're not time specific, like a date specific kind of thing, that it's something that I could reuse to keep them enduring kind of thing.
Okay.
And I was not very good at that at first. I'm getting better. But the other thing I just noticed was like just little things like, you know, if you can see out my window that it snowed and it's May, you know, I feel like I've got to, like, on the one hand, the students never complained about it or said anything, but it felt a little like me, like I didn't want to be, you know, the old model of a professor who just recycles their lectures year in and year out. I want to avoid that, obviously. So I don't know. I don't know if that's even a question, but that's certainly a concern that's come up. I totally, and I really like the idea of playlists and keeping things that I can reuse as long as reasonably possible. But it's a real challenge in terms of like how to do that, you know, if I'm not used to, you know, creating video content.
Yeah, I mean, I find that reusing videos, it's a catch-22, you know, because of those little things. And some people might not even notice that and be like, oh, I remember I felt really passionate about this lecture and I really want to use this again. And then they watch it and it's like, oh no.
Yeah, no, I look in and I see mistakes and I'm like, oh, I should just redo it and add all this other stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's easy for me to say because, you know, I do video editing on the side, like as a side gig, but yeah, and just, it's better to refresh every once in a while because, I mean, who knows, more research might have been done on a specific topic, or, you know, there might have been breakthroughs about a specific subject that you want to include instead of just rehashing stuff that has been used before. So. And
I don't really like have super long lectures anyway. It's not like the sciences where there would be, here's the bulk of material you got to get. But for instance, what I would do is a lot of my videos I would use would be introducing real basic preliminary kind of information that they need to have as a baseline.
Right.
And then using the discussion of that particular group of students, that particular class and time to sort of develop that. So even the videos I was using, it wasn't like they were going into great detail in some sort of topic. It was just beginning a discussion. So I could conceivably use them in, you know, semester after semester for at least some time. But again, I felt a little like I just needed to be, A, learn how to make the videos so they would do that, and B, be careful about not letting the videos age too much.
Yes, it is a delicate balance.
Yeah. So